Welcome to the Writer's Journey podcast. I'm Michael Laran, a science fiction and fantasy author on a journey to go from nobody to bestseller, and I'm documenting every step of the way. Tune in every week as I pull back the curtain on my writing life and how I'm building a writing career while working a full-time job, raising a family, and attending law school classes in the evenings. You can find show notes for this week's episode, a free starter library of my fiction, and much more at michaellaran.com. Hello and welcome to episode 93. 93 is a good number, and I titled the title of this episode, Why Do People Like Audiobooks So Much? So I had a conversation with someone randomly that I wanted to share because I thought it confirmed a lot of the things that I've been thinking and that I think a lot of authors have been thinking and have known for many years about audiobooks. So in news with me, writing news is going great. I finished Reaper's Way, like I said last week, so that was done. Did a quick revision, got that ready for my editor, got it backed up on a separate hard drive and on a separate thumb drive just in case anything goes wrong. So it will be ready for my editor in January. And as we speak today, I'm recording this episode a little bit earlier. On Monday of this week, I started Cold Hard Magic, which is book 2 in my Good Necromancer series. So off to a pretty good start. Anytime I open a novel, I always try to do something a little bit different. So I don't know why this idea popped into my head, but I tried to do a different type of opening. So essentially what I wanted to do was have Lester at his house, but then all these weird things start happening. Like everybody starts calling him or everyone tries to get his attention somehow. And if you've ever seen the play Rumors by Neil Simon, I kind of wanted to tap into that, where there's constantly doors opening, people coming in, people coming out, and just trying to capture that frenziedness in an opening. I've never quite done that before. And so I tried a different type of opening with the first 500 words or so. And so we'll see how it goes, but it's off to a pretty good start. I've got a pretty clear image in my head of how the first maybe 5% of the novel's going to go. I understand who the villain is going to be very clearly. I can see that person in my head. It will definitely be someone who is probably Lester's archenemy. So somebody that definitely eclipses the villain from book 1. If you've read book 1, you will know that that's a pretty big deal. So it's off to a pretty good start, and I'm excited to report more on that. I'm estimating that I will get to about the 25% mark at around the 22nd of December. So just before Christmas, maybe around Christmas, I hope to be 25% of the way through it. I think that the production of this novel is going to take me about a month, maybe 45 days. So yeah, we'll definitely see how that goes, but I am excited to get into this because it is a long time coming. So still have not gotten my law grade back. We'll report back on that when we get it. But one of the things I talked about in last week's episode was a unique way of dictating. So I talked last week about how I heard an interview with Kevin J. Anderson, and he talked about how he dictates not with Dragon, the software that uses AI to translate what you say into words on the page, but he uses dictation via transcription. And I was just doing some walking. I was walking my dog, and I took my dog on an extra long walk, and it ended up being about 20 minutes. And I thought, this would be a great time to try out that technique, right? So you dictate while you're walking, and then you get home and you send it to a transcriptionist. So I think I'm going to try that. I don't know how yet. So I did some research on some equipment, and I found some Bluetooth headsets. But the trick, I think, with this is trying to find a headset that's not going to make me look like a crazy person when I'm walking through my neighborhood. You definitely don't want that. So I'm going to try it. So it's essentially going to be like a 3-way context switching when I'm writing. So writing on my desktop in the mornings, writing on my phone throughout the day, and then when I'm taking longer walks with my dog, dictating the novel and picking up where I left off. It's kind of an experiment. We'll see what happens, but I'm just thinking if I dictate a little bit of this novel, like maybe 10% of it, that's manageable from a cost perspective because it's about a penny a word for transcription. So that's definitely different. So I'm going to report on that. January, February, whenever it starts. But I'm definitely going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to try it. So whether or not it works or not, you never know. I think that as with all things in life, especially in the writing life, everything you do is an experiment. And some experiments work, some experiments don't work. There are good failures and there are bad failures. Like I said a few episodes ago, I heard someone say that failure is like cholesterol. There's good failure and bad failure. So I very, very seldom do I experience bad failure, like failure that I can learn nothing from. And so if I learn nothing from this, I will at least take away a different way to exercise my brain and a different way to write a novel, which I can share with you all on this show and share on my YouTube channel, which I think is in and of itself enough, right? So the next thing I wanted to talk about was, and it's something I wanted to spend the balance of this episode talking about, and that is, so I woke up on Friday morning and I noticed it was a little bit colder than usual, like really, really cold. So I went downstairs and looked at my thermostat, and thermostat's blinking at me, and it says check for service. So go downstairs, check the furnace. Sure enough, it won't kick on. No matter what I do, the furnace won't kick on. And it is literally, I'm not kidding, one of the coldest days of the year in Des Moines. So I call the service guys, and the techs come to my house, and the tech gets downstairs, gets the furnace all tore open, and he says, I got good news and I got bad news. And I said, well, what's the good news? And he said, the good news is there is no good news. He said, the bad news is I don't know what's wrong with your furnace, but it's definitely shot. So whoever this prior owner of my house was decided to purchase a furnace that was too big for the house. And so the furnace basically zonked out in about 9 years. Average length of a furnace is about 12 to 13 years, 15 maybe if you take really good care of it. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, crap. So then the sales guy comes over and says, hey, just hold out your arm and we'll bleed you, for the furnace, in terms of paying for it. And by the way, we'll take your firstborn child and maybe we'll take the royalties to your next 50 books. And maybe that way you'll be able to pay for it. So anyway, before all this happens, though, the service tech is looking at my furnace, and I go down and check on him, ask him if he needs anything. He's like, oh, no, I'm good. I'll be up in a few minutes. And so I'm just on my phone, sitting in my kitchen, just kind of waiting for him to come up. And he comes up, and he's got this strange look on his face. And I'm thinking, oh, no, what's wrong with my furnace? And so he asks, hey, I have to ask this. I hope you don't mind me being too intrusive, but are you in photography? So anytime service people come over to my house, they usually have to go into the basement, and all of them see my studio for Author Level Up, and they always see it. They see the lights, and they see the wall, and they see the props, and they see the microphone and the boom arm and all this good stuff and the tripod. And I always get the question, what do you do down there? This is mysterious. This is enigmatic. And so he asked me, hey, are you in photography? And I said, oh, no, it's not photography. I have a podcast, and I also have a YouTube channel, and I'm a writer, and I've written books. And then the next question was, well, how many books have you written? And I said, well, I've written about 50. And the guy was like, whoa, that's crazy. And he's like, so what do you write about? And so I told him how I started writing, and everybody always thinks that I'm a full-time writer, and I tell him, no, I don't do it full-time. Anyway, so we're waiting in my kitchen for the sales guy to show up, because the sales guy has all the information on the new furnaces, and I'm waiting to see how much I'm going to have to bleed out, in terms of my wallet. And so we're just kind of shooting the breeze. And he was talking to me about how he really likes to listen to audiobooks. And so I was like, oh, that's great. Tell me more about that. And so he was telling me that he and his wife actually have Audible subscriptions. And one of the things he told me was that they end up fighting over the credits every month, which I was like, I can definitely relate to that. You only get 2 credits per month on the best plans. And so he was telling me about some of his habits and some of his wife's habits about audiobooks. And I just used that opportunity to just kind of chat with him and just what is a reader, like, how does a reader perceive audiobooks? How do they buy them? What are they thinking about when they're buying an audiobook? And just naturally throughout the conversation while we were waiting for this guy to show up, he told me that he and his wife have to choose their audiobooks carefully, mainly because they subscribe to Audible. And like I said before, you only get those 2 credits. And so they have to think about what kind of value proposition an audiobook offers before they can buy it. And so one of the things that they consider when they're purchasing an audiobook is length. Length is critically important. And I kind of mentioned, so if you had a choice, would you buy would you use your credit to buy a 2-hour audiobook or like a 37-hour audiobook? And he's like, the 37-hour audiobook without question. He's like, if it's too little, then, if I really, really want it, then I'll buy it. I'll just pay the money to buy it a la carte. I was like, okay, that confirms, that's definitely my own buying habit. And that definitely confirms some things that I've thought about audiobooks, audiobook listeners for a while. And so then I asked him, what kind of books does your wife listen to? And he told me that she loves The Hunger Games and Harry Potter, pop culture type books. And he said that she especially loves the audiobook edition of the Hunger Games. And he said that she listens to that book over and over and over. And he's like, I tell her, there are plenty of different audiobooks you can listen to. But she says, no, I actually just like this narrator. Listening to this book takes me to a happy place, because when I first heard it and when I first read this book, it was so important to me and I enjoyed it so much that listening to it helps me reconnect with that prior time. And so it's almost like comfort for me when I'm doing laundry or I'm doing dishes to be able to listen to this book, and it just brings me joy. And I was like, that's really, really interesting. I said, do you do that? I asked the tech, and he says, no. He says, I usually just listen to a book, and, I don't really listen to a whole lot of fiction. And one of the things he said that I thought was pretty interesting was that the reason he doesn't listen to a whole lot of fiction isn't because he doesn't enjoy it. He says, he said, I read a lot of paperbacks, but I don't listen to fiction very much. One, because I'm driving for work, and I find it very difficult to form the images that the narrator is saying in my head. And I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. Tell me more about that. And he said, well, it's because when I'm driving, I can't put all of those pieces together. I feel like my brain has to work too hard when I'm listening to fiction, whereas when I'm listening to nonfiction or self-help, like I think he said he listened to Dale Carnegie and like Ray Dalio and like big self-help books. He says that's a lot easier because it's almost like the person is sitting in your passenger seat and they're talking to you and just giving you advice. And he's like, it's no different than if I was buddying up with another service tech and we were just driving to the next job. Nonfiction is so much easier to listen to. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting. I had never considered that. And I told him, I said, I never have really experienced that problem, but I can see how some people would experience that. And that's definitely something I've never heard anybody say about fiction before, especially someone who likes fiction. I've heard people say, I don't like to listen to audiobook fiction. But I've never heard anyone say, well, I like fiction, but I don't like to listen to audiobooks because blah, blah, blah. So anyway, and another thing he said, I asked him, so if his wife listens to a lot of audiobooks and if you listen to a lot of audiobooks and you've got your credits and all that, I said, do you ever find that you just have a hard time getting through your entire library? And he said, yeah, I really do. He's like, sometimes there's so many books that I'll buy, but I just have such a big backlog. And so I said, have you ever considered listening to your book at like 1.5 or 2 times speed? And he's like, no, I didn't even know you could do that. Which confirms another suspicion that I had, which is that most audiobook listeners do not use the time tracking feature. So I must be like an alien because I listen to my audiobooks at like 2.5 times speed. I like the narrator. That's important to me. There's some audiobooks where I'll listen to them at regular speed, but 9 times out of 10, I just want the information or I just want the story. I think that's a little unusual, right? So they don't necessarily listen for that, which I thought was pretty insightful. And then another thing he said that kind of made me break into my evil laugh break into my Mr. Burns laugh from The Simpsons, was he said, yeah, I really like to listen to nonfiction, and I like the narrator. The narrator is important. If the narrator sucks, then I won't listen to the book. I'll return it. But then he said, I especially like audiobooks and nonfiction that are read by the narrator. And so then, that's when the Mr. Burns MP3 went off in my head of laughing. I was like, oh, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm about to do that in January. I didn't tell him that, but that was it confirms something I've said for a long time, which is that audiobooks written or read by the narrator, I think would be a great selling point for nonfiction and poetry. So there's something to that. I think that's going to be something that does very well for me. Maybe. We'll see. And so another thing he had mentioned was that audiobooks are perfect for driving. He spends all of his time on the road every day, all day, every day. And so that's how he consumes his information. And so I talked about my 2020 strategy on my YouTube channel last week. I did a video on my 2020 strategy. And I've talked all the time this year about how in the next 10 to 15 years, the value proposition of the writer, the value proposition of the reading experience, and the value proposition of the book itself are going to change drastically, right? And one of the reasons it's going to change drastically is because audio is going to become the predominant format for people that read in 10 to 15 years. The reason I think this guy really liked audio, and the reason I think his wife really liked audio, is because they both had jobs where they had to be on the road, right? And so he told me I was a paperback guy before I started listening to audiobooks. I didn't really do the ebook thing. But yeah, I found that I was constantly on the road and I had all this time. And so why not use it, right? And so when I think about audiobooks, I think about the conversation I had with that guy who was super cool and super gracious. And, we were just having fun. We were just kind of shooting the breeze, talking about books and stuff like that. And I think about that. And then I think about the just enormous amount of people who still don't understand the promise of audio. Like you talk to him and then you go off and just pick some random person on the street and say, hey, do you listen to audiobooks? And they'll look at you like you have 10 heads, because most people still don't listen to audiobooks. And the people that do listen to audiobooks, they're still not habitual listeners, kind of like me. I adopted audio pretty early. I've been listening to audiobooks in their digital format for about the past 5 years or so. And so, yeah, it's definitely interesting. And I always find as a writer, it's really, really fascinating to talk to readers and talk to them about their habits and how they read. And when people post on my YouTube channel, when people write me privately about my podcast, I'm always paying very close attention to their reading habits, right? Because I think that is critically important to understand as a writer, because that's how we make our living, right? We make our living in service to readers, making sure that we have products that they enjoy and that they can consume and that they find useful and that they find entertaining. And you can't do that if you don't listen to them and you don't go where they are and talk to them. So that was a great little conversation that I had. And, it's funny. I always find myself in odd conversations. My wife is just sitting in the next room, just kind of shaking her head like, whoa, there Michael goes again. But anyway, good conversation, and maybe if any of you listening are writers, maybe you took something away from that. I think a lot of you, it just confirms a lot of things that we've known in the industry for a long time, but it's just kind of nice to hear it from a reader unprovoked. So anyway, I wanted to end this week's episode with a Christmas giveaway. Ho, ho, ho. So this has been a great year for me. It has been a great year for the writer's journey. It's been a great year for Author Level Up, just thinking about all the different product launches that I launched, and good from a book perspective. And I really have no complaints about how this year went. I talked about maybe a couple weeks ago, about how I had some failures this year. There are some things that I wish had transpired a little bit differently. But if you look at the big picture of this year, this was a very successful year for me, perhaps one of the best I've had since I became a writer. And so, I just think that's pretty cool, and I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for the people that listen to me every week and have supported me. So I'm going to do a giveaway. It's a minor giveaway, but I'm going to give some things away. So the writer's journey has always been about, how do I talk about what's on my mind and how do I come up with something that I can use to connect with readers, right? So I'm going to give away some of my books for Christmas this year. So if you're looking for something to read, or if you've been listening to the show for the last couple weeks and have been thinking, oh, some of his books are kind of interesting, I'll check them out. Well, now is the perfect opportunity. So what I'm giving away is I'm giving away 3 copies of Shadow Deal, book 1 in my Good Necromancer series. It follows Lester Broussard. He is an ex-necromancer who is using his powers for good when he gets roped into a evil deal with the demon that killed his family. He's trying to make sure that this demon gets put away so that he doesn't hurt anyone like he hurt him. And so it's a story of redemption. It takes place in St. Louis, Missouri, my hometown. And a lot of people who have followed along as I wrote this story in public have said it's one of my best novels. So follows Lester Broussard. I'm giving away an ebook copy for 3 lucky people. For that, all you have to do to get your copy, I'm going to do it's a raffle, random entry raffle. Just go to michaelleron.com/Christmas. Fill out the form. It'll ask for your email address, and then it'll ask another question or 2, and then I will make. See, today is December 16th. Let's see. This is going to go live. Got to check my calendar here so I don't screw up my dates. Seems like I always screw up my dates when I do calendars. So this episode's going to go live on Thursday, the 19th. So on Sunday, the 22nd at midnight, it will come down. So you will be notified probably the following Monday. So just before Christmas, you'll be notified if you win. Now, I'm not only just giving away Shadow Deal, I'm also giving away The Last Dragon Lord, the complete series. So Old Dark, Old Evil, Old Wicked. It's my series that follows my evil, wicked old dragon, Old Dark, who is a despot. He rules the countryside, terrorizes people with his dragons. He is just a narcissistic, evil dragon, right? He's like a mix between Smaug and Francis Underwood and Richard III. And he gets his comeuppance at the very beginning of the novel, and everything goes downhill from there. So you will have to find out in the Last Dragon Lord trilogy. So this is one of my more popular series with readers. They like Old Dark a lot. It's definitely a series that keeps you guessing. You never know what's going to happen. And I'm giving away an ebook copy as well as an audiobook copy for 3 lucky people. So ebook copy and an audiobook copy, because this audiobook is available and narrated by Miles Miley, who did a really, really great job. So go to michaelleron.com/Christmas to enter, and hopefully you will be one of those 6 lucky people that gets something. Now, if you have read either Shadow Deal or the Last Dragon Lord series, don't worry. You can get any other book in my catalog. Just once I notify you, just let me know, and let me know what book you want, and I'll take care of you. And for my writers listening, I am also doing a separate giveaway for my writers at authorlevelup.com/Christmas. I'm giving away some really good writing gifts and tools over there as well. So if you're interested, you can check that giveaway as well. So cool. So with that, I just want to, again, just thank you for all your support for this past year. The Writer's Journey has done amazingly well. And like I said, I say this continuously. I'm blown away that so many people listen to me every month. And I hope that you and your families have a happy holiday, and be sure to be safe. Don't do anything crazy. And it'll be after Christmas until the next episode goes live. So definitely be safe. And if for those of you in the parts of the world where you're having a white Christmas, I hope that you enjoy that as well. So I'll leave it at that. Peace, and I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for joining me this week. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll enjoy my backlist episodes at michaelleron.com/podcast. For your free starter library of my favorite novels, join my fan club by visiting michaelleron.com/fanclub. If you're a writer and want to connect with me further, check out my YouTube channel, Author Level Up, for helpful writing advice at authorlevelup.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.